minorities are concerned that the majority will trample on their rights. And so it has been for Jews. Jews have been disproportionately involved in the issue of religion and state because as a small minority they had a great stake in that question. It's worth remembering that the earliest moments when Jews spoke out had to do with Sunday closing laws. And for a lot of Jews, if you had to close on Sunday because of the state law, and you had to close on Shabbat because of religious law, that meant you only had 5 days a week to earn a living. Everybody else had 6. And there were all sorts of implications to that. So it's no surprise that in early America, Jews sought exemption to those kinds of rules, or argued that Sunday closing laws were a violation of their religious liberty. They didn't actually win that battle exactly. The court ruled that you could have Sunday closing laws, but they did win in the sense that America adopted a 5-day week and after World War II, and that solved the problem. But overall, Jews and other minorities have been central to debates over religion and state because as a rule, minorities are the ones most affected. The Seventh-day Adventists in America have similarly been deeply involved in fighting blue laws because they too wanted to observe the seventh day as Shabbat, or as their Sabbath, and felt discriminated against if they were forced to close on Sunday. In other words, many would argue, well, majority rule. But Jews, as a small minority, were deeply interested in ensuring that when it came to religion and state, the essential point was, no, there are minority rights. That's why it's in the Bill of Rights. And just like the majority cannot tell somebody what to say because there is freedom of speech, so Jews insisted the majority cannot tell someone how to pray or how to conduct their religion because there is religious liberty. And you only get liberty if you fight for your liberty. And that's why Jews have been so centrally involved in the fight for religious liberty, really from the very beginning of America's history, or the history of the United States, understanding that a minority group is the group that is most likely to have to fight for its religious rights and liberties. For the first 100 years after the Constitution, the standard Jewish position was what Jews called equal footing, meaning they wanted the same rights as everybody else. If other people could run for office, Jews wanted the right to run for office, to take one example. But only after the Civil War do we see a change whereby instead of battling for equal footing, what we today would call equal rights, Jews took on the strategy of a high wall of separation between religion and state. And the reason for that, I think, is because Jews found that some of their former allies really came to support a Christian America. They became advocates of what was known in those days as a Christian amendment to the Constitution, which deeply frightened Jews. And as a result of that, Jews determined that the best strategy was a high wall of separation, something, of course, not found in the Constitution, but articulated in a letter by Thomas Jefferson. There also was considerable fear in Protestant circles in the last half of the 19th century that Catholics wanted to have their own schools and were deeply interested in religious ideas that the Protestants were nervous about. And so there were also some Protestants who came to support a high wall of separation. Let's have no involvement in religion. The state should be utterly secular, really as a way of making sure that the Catholic Church did not gain power in a way that frightened them. So you had these two groups for slightly different reasons that came to advocate this idea of a wall of separation, and that really set aside or superseded the earlier idea that Jews simply wanted to make sure that they were equal citizens having the same rights as everybody else. After World War II, which brought very significant new Orthodox Jewish religious leaders to America. The previous Lubavitcher Rebbe comes in 1940. Rabbi Cutler arrives, and others. These people came from a different world. They indeed couldn't quite understand why Jews didn't put their own interests first. And when they looked at Jewish interests, it was clear to them that Jewish interests should involve Jewish education, maybe support for what come to be known as Jewish day schools. In the case of Chabad, there was great interest in a plan known as released time, where people would get out of public schools early certain days of the week and go for religious education and so on. And to their mind, this was very much in the Jewish community's self-interest, especially since after World War II, it became very clear the American Jewry had to create native-born Jewish leaders. It couldn't rely, as it previously had, on leaders coming from Europe, because the last European Jewry had been destroyed. And that changes the outlook of many, especially in the Orthodox community, who said if we have to create Jewish leaders and they have to be trained in America, then clearly we need new kinds of educational initiatives. That should be a very high priority. Moreover, and this is also of interest, some of those rabbis looked around and said, you know what, the Catholic Church has a school system that is partly supported. they understand that if you want to raise people in a particular religion, you have to educate them. Maybe they should be our allies, whereas in an earlier day, Jews had supported the wall of separation, in many cases against Catholic religious leadership. So all of that changed, and I would say most especially Chabad and Rav Aaron Kotler really speak up in what at the time seemed almost heretical to other Jews in favor of changing Jewish attitudes. This was a great shock to the Jewish community relations field, because for a time the whole spectrum of Jews had agreed on various statements on separation of a religion and state. But already in the 1960s, you begin to see great changes. And there are people not only in Orthodoxy, but later in other movements, who begin to wonder, is this really the wisest position on the part of American Jews to support a wall of separation? Because after all, that suggests that Jews are opposed to religion. Why not make alliances with people who are in favor of religion to demonstrate? So they said that Judaism is also a religion, and that Jews are as proud of their religion as evangelical Protestants and pious Catholics are of their religion. And so from the 1960s, we begin to see multiple views within the Jewish community, especially on issues connected with education. And whereas the earlier Jewish community had placed great stress on the clause in the First Amendment that dealt with no establishment. Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion, and they said that means no state religion or state involvement in religion. Now we saw a shift, and people said, wait a minute, there's also another clause, and that clause says, or prohibiting the free exercise thereof. And they said the free exercise of religion suggests that it should be possible to devote government funds to promoting free exercise of religion. And I would say over the last 40, almost 50 years now, we have seen really a dispute within the American Jewish world on really what's in the best interests of the American Jewish community. Is the community's interest best served by the high wall of separation that Jews talked about from, say, the 1860s to the 1960s, or are Jewish interests better served by government support for some aspects of religion that will strengthen Jewish education and other aspects of Jewish life? And nowadays, on almost all issues that come before the courts, whether it's an eruv or state oversight of kashrut, or most especially state aid to Jewish schools, you'll find that the Jewish community is divided between the older view and the newer view, both groups insisting that what they are supporting is best for the long-term interests of the American Jewish community. The question of what people's motivations really are is always a very difficult question for a historian to answer. I do think that in addition to concerns about what's best for the Jews, both sides have a certain vision of what's best for America. The one side argued, much as Jews had argued in Western Europe, that church-state separation really means that religion should be a matter that's kept in the home. Some of them went so far as to say, be a Jew at home, be a man, meaning be a person when you go out into the street. And that idea, which is really found still in, say, contemporary French thinking about church-state separation, is that religion is a private matter to be kept only in the house of worship and the home, but on the street one shouldn't so much as display one's religion. That's one view, an extreme view, but one that had many supporters, even in the American Jewish community. Others, and in this case I think the Lubavitcher Rebbe was a prime proponent, argued that religious America, an America that believed in God, an America that where more and more people had one or another kind of religious faith, was an America that would be good for everyone, Jews included. So that one argued that secular America was best for Jews and the ideal to which Jews should strive, and the other argued, no, a religious America, an America where you have many people of faith, even if their faith is different, should be the ideal to which Jews should strive. I would say that the consensus issue for Jews was that they didn't want any particular religion. In other words, we don't find anybody saying, yes, a Christian amendment would be a good thing to the Constitution. Obviously, on that matter, all were agreed, but in the post-World War II era, the debate between those who wanted society to become ever more secular and those who wanted it to be religious became more and more pronounced, and this was especially the case after the United States Supreme Court in the 1960s first banned Bible reading in the public schools. Before then, there had been a sacred text that unified Americans, although admittedly many Jews took offense at readings from the Christian New Testament as part of the Bible, but then the Supreme Court first throws out Bible reading and then throws out prayer in the school. And prayer in the school was a matter on which Jews had been divided. There were Jews, even one or two in the Reform camp, who argued, we believe in prayer. Why shouldn't there be an opportunity for non-denominational prayer? And famously, the Lubavitcher Rebbe wrote such a prayer, which he felt everybody ought to be able to recite. But the court didn't agree. And when prayer was removed, there were, of course, a lot of Americans not just Jews, who said, I can't send my children to a school where it's forbidden to pray. And others raised the question of doesn't forbidding people to pray go against the free exercise clause? Doesn't free exercise mean I have a right to pray? And years later, the Supreme Court changed somewhat its view and made it possible for groups to come together for prayer as long as it wasn't mandated by the school administration. And so we see the same tension built into the Constitution itself between the no establishment clause, fearing that one religion will become established and have power over all others, and the free exercise clause guaranteeing that everybody should have the right to exercise their religion freely. The Supreme Court, interestingly, a bit like the Talmud, makes decisions on the basis of particular issues and cases, not on a theoretical matter. So obviously, some specific cases have been decided, but no sooner is one case decided than other issues come along. So perhaps Bible reading is not acceptable. But what about the study of the Bible as literature? That leads perhaps to a different conclusion. Or maybe we can't give money for prayer in this, we can't give money. Maybe we can't give money for religious education, but maybe we can give money for things that go on in parochial schools that are totally secular, for their supplies, for the teaching of English and history and math, and so on. And so new issues come up, and in each case the Supreme Court endeavors to find an appropriate middle ground, if you will, between those two clauses of the First Amendment. And I would say that in recent decades, the idea of allowing religious free exercise has certainly taken preference over the earlier Supreme Court that seemed most interested in separating church and state. But exactly how far that goes, can someone of one religion say, I have religious scruples against selling things to someone of another religion? Those questions are still live ones that the court will have to decide in the years ahead.